Good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Wakefield. I'm the program coordinator at the National Council for History Education, and I'm very happy to welcome you to The People in Our Neighborhood, a primary source mystery. For the past 30 years, NCHE has been a pioneer in the implementation of professional development for history teachers. NCHE connects K-12 teachers, college and university faculty, museums, libraries, and archives through its programs and national conference. This school year, our annual conference will be online from April 8th through 11th, and I invite you to go to our website, ncheteach.org, to learn more about it and also the other programs that we offer. It's my pleasure tonight to introduce our scholars. Dr. Ilene Berson is a professor of early childhood at the University of South Florida and coordinates the early childhood doctoral program in the Department of Curriculum Instruction and Learning. She also holds affiliate faculty status in learning design and technology, as well as qualitative research. She conducts participatory research to explore young children's civic engagement through multiple literacies and studies the intersection of technology and the pedagogy of inquiry in the early years. She's also led international studies on integrating social justice and child advocacy into early childhood teacher preparation. Dr. Michael J. Berson is a professor in the Department of Curriculum Instruction and Learning at the University of South Florida and a senior fellow in the Florida Joint Center for Citizenship. He coordinates the USF College of Education PhD program in curriculum and instruction with a concentration in social science education and serves as the course lead for elementary social studies education. Dr. Berson has served as an advisor on cybersecurity and the integration of technology into education in schools, companies, and organizations throughout the world. These two scholars were part of the team that developed and launched KidCitizen, which you will learn more about tonight. I'm excited to be here and to learn from them, and I know you'll really enjoy that. I've seen them before, and I think they're fabulous presenters. I will be moderating the chat, and I encourage you to engage with them by commenting in the chat appropriately. And if you have a question you would like me to pose to them, please type it into the Q&A so that I can ask it at the end. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the time over to Ilene and Michael Berson.
Thank you so much. It's great for us to be here with you this evening.
Yeah, this is a very special opportunity for us. We're members of NCHE, and we're really pleased to be talking with you tonight about elementary social studies and our work with primary sources. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be turning off our cameras so that we can focus on the slide presentation and the video that we'll be showing as part of our presentation. And then we'll be periodically asking you questions related to the presentation, which you can simply type into chat as we're progressing. So we're going to get started. We're going to turn off our video now. And welcome to The People in Our Neighborhood, a primary source mystery. So one of the key things that we really want to talk about tonight and we focus on with our elementary students is what is a primary source. In fact, if you look at the standards of social studies across the United States, you will actually find quite a few standards in the elementary grades specifically focusing on teaching children about primary sources.
And for those of you who are here in Florida, beginning in kindergarten, we actually do have standards about introducing primary sources to our youngest learners in the schools. And so we do not shy away from starting with a strong foundation of this disciplinary foundation of knowledge and understanding about what is a primary source, but we do it in a way that allows children to developmentally connect with this topic. So what we're going to do is we're going to share with you one of our episodes, which is we call sort of a bite-size episode that you can find on the KidCitizen site that introduces primary sources to young children. So as we're going to be showing this to you, just to sort of give you a little bit of a context, we've done playthroughs ahead of time just for ease of being able to stop and start and talk about some of the things that you're going to be seeing. But we're going to share with you this particular episode, which is the introduction in an interactive sort of way about what are primary sources, utilizing kinds of contextual clues and information that young learners could relate to.
Tap Start to begin. Hi, my name is Ella. We are going to go on an adventure together. We will be looking for history clues to help us explore what happened long ago. Let's take a look at this photo and see what clues we can discover. Tap on the table to start. These clues are called primary sources. Primary sources are items left behind by participants or observers at events long ago. Let's see if you can help me find some. Tap on each item on the table and we'll talk about it.
So I'm going to stop right there because I see a wonderful question from Stacy that she's asked, and that's so glad that you asked that, Stacy. There is no sign-in to be able to get access to this. When you go to the KidCitizen site, it is just click and play. And this, as we'll talk about as we go forward, this is accessible on any kind of device, and it's freely accessible for children, teachers, families to be able to engage with. What you're seeing as you're seeing sort of the clicking going on, that's where there's interactive moments. Again, we're doing this as sort of a playthrough for demonstration purposes. But as you go through this with children, these are opportunities for them to be able to explore. And you, if as a teacher, may want to present this to them as part of either a large group or even with a small group of students, and help facilitate or scaffold through instruction, and you can kind of guide along the progress that they make through the episode.
After we see something happen, we may make a drawing or paint a picture of the event. This drawing was made long ago by a child. It is a primary source. We may send a postcard or letter to tell other people about our lives. This is a postcard my great-grandmother sent to my father. It's a primary source. Sometimes we take a photo to remember an event or a person. This photo from long ago shows 6 children who are cousins. It's a primary source. This old toy is a primary source. It tells us about what kids played with when it was made. You did a great job finding primary sources. I can't wait until our next adventure collecting clues from primary sources to explore life long ago. See you later.
So Eileen, yes, thank you for pointing out that, this works really well to be able to put into a technology center or a learning center in the classroom. We've used it in classrooms on large interactive whiteboards where children can come up and be able to touch things. And I love Marilee's comment, right? That, dependent upon your age and chronological points of reference, it doesn't necessarily seem like these things are from such long ago, but that is sort of the wonderful element that we want to help children develop again, this sort of disciplinary literacy with this vocabulary introduction about what is primary sources, is the fact that they themselves might be engaged in the act of creating primary sources that reflect their own lives every day. History is made every moment of every day.
One of our goals with KidCitizen and introducing young children to primary sources is we wanted to make history accessible. We wanted to make sure that they felt that there was a place for them, not only in the learning about history, but in the making of history. So why are primary sources important in the early years anyways?
So one of the things that many of you may recognize from your own sort of instructional practices or your familiarity with the standards that you have to teach is that typically when we look across the elementary school curriculum, K-5, we see a strong focus on literacy and numeracy skills. And certainly when we look at that element around literacy skill development, we have research evidence that tells us a few things that sort of are contradictory to some practices that teachers have been doing for a long time. One of those things that the research evidence tells us is that young children actually are more engaged and connected to authentic representations of the world around them. You know, in contrast to what we oftentimes call the more cartoon or Disneyfication of, you know, sort of representing concepts in the world, the reality is that children actually find greater points of connection to their own funds of knowledge. And it then fosters questions and lots of engagement to want to learn more when they see something that's familiar, has elements that sort of connect with, that looks like. But there's also some uniqueness there that then engages them in the mystery and the wondering to want to explore further. The other thing is also that we recognize too from actually recent research that has come out is that in particular, to be able to further sort of address the opportunity gap that we know that we are confronting in many of our schools and classrooms across the country, is that social studies content knowledge in particular is a great and a very important and vital entry point for learning and literacy development. So that's why we sort of bring in primary sources. They allow us to have these more authentic representations of engaging children in that inquiry process. They also allow us to diversify our representations through multiple perspectives that may not otherwise be seen in some of the curricular materials that we've been providing children with.
So let's just talk a little bit about KidCitizen before we jump into our mystery for tonight. What is KidCitizen anyways? KidCitizen is a project that was developed from the Library of Congress initiative called Congress Civic Participation in Primary Sources. It introduces a new way for young children to engage with history in primary sources. And that key word is engage. We want kids actively involved in the process of learning about history with primary sources. It provides this authentic, appropriate level of interaction. We carefully studied each episode to make sure that the text is on target. We tested this out in the field across the country, and we explored each of the episodes to make sure that they connect through the use of primary sources. We had a team that spanned across a number of states and a great number of expertise. We had historians like Edward Ayers and Spencer Crew, who is a historian of public history. We had researchers in civic education from Circle. We had teachers. We had researchers all working together to create KidCitizen in these series of episodes with our mystery, which we're going to share with you tonight.
And probably our most important contributors to this effort were the school children that were sort of our test on our beta versions of this and gave us authentic insights about areas that they enjoyed and maybe areas that we needed to refine further. And they were just fabulous throughout this process.
So this is just a brief look at what our episodes look like, and you will have access to them. As Ilene mentioned, all of these are free and they will always be free. So you just happened to see the primary source episode, which was a very brief 5-minute introduction to what is a primary source. Later, as part of our mystery, we're going to focus on community helpers. Then we have one on Congress and child labor, which is geared more toward upper elementary, 4th and 5th grade, which is really an exciting one. And then as we explore the world around us and the power of social media and news, we always question the sourcing of information. Where does it come from? Who took a picture? Why did they take a picture? So we actually have an episode called Snap a Photo, Agent of Change. How did photographers help convince Congress to pass child labor laws, where we specifically explore the sourcing of information and teach children to consider the background of each photograph that they see. Capture the Flag looks at the flag and its representation in the United States. Then we have one that's really relevant today, especially that this week is election week, Welcome to Congress, which explores Patsy Mink, who was the very first Japanese American woman elected to Congress from Hawaii. And then a new episode that just came out is called Rosa Parks, A Proud Daughter. And we take a different look at Rosa Parks and we try to create, through the use of primary sources, a better understanding of the relationship between Rosa Parks and her mother through a primary source. And then just this past week, we released the new teacher's guide for A Bird's Eye View, Wandering with Maps, which explores maps from long ago. And then we're in the finishing stages of a close looking episode focusing on the Mitaki family who was in Manzanar. One of our other exciting components too that we should mention is that we're working in partnership with the University of Puerto Rico to create Spanish versions of our episodes, which could be used in classes as well. So what we're going to do is
I was just going to interrupt and say that Mary Lee had asked about an index, if there was an index to find different time frames, or is it just looking at what the descriptions are to tell that?
Yeah, so the descriptions focus on the topics, but within the context of the teacher's guide, you can find additional historical background information, but we don't have it indexed by time periods, but that's a great question.
And Linda asked about the Spanish, when that was going to be available.
So actually we are in our final stages with our first few episodes right now. There was a, just a few changes that we were making to some of the text because we're translating both the audio and the text based into Spanish. So hopefully in the next few weeks, we're hoping.
Right.
Good questions. Good questions. Keep them coming. So one of the key things that is central to all of our KidCitizen episodes is a very powerful, developmentally appropriate primary source that is highlighted and helps the learner really explore the topic of focus in that episode.
And, we talked about the fact that using primary sources is a wonderful entry point to engage young children in inquiry, but that doesn't mean every primary source will have that sort of compelling opportunity to foster a highly educable moment. So we really are going to talk about sort of that process of actually selecting the primary sources as we go through. And so you'll learn a little bit more about the pedagogy behind it.
So our pedagogy is based on the visual thinking aspect of see, think, wonder. And if you look at some of the primary source analysis tools from the Library of Congress, you'll see a lot of similarities. And we work with a mentor character, and our mentor character is named Ella. Ella's just a little bit older than our users, and she's a little bit sassy. So sometimes she'll respond back to the students in some interesting and exciting ways. But one of the things that we really tried hard to do throughout all of our episodes is never to stifle inquiry, allowing students to continually ask questions. And if they make a mistake, that's okay. There's another opportunity to try another response. We give children the opportunity to explore with the mystery or exploring this episode being the reward. So you will not necessarily see points or stars in our episodes. It really highlights the inquiry or exploring the story.
And that really aligns again with what the research tells us about young learners and active engagement in interactive forms of episodes like this. So you might see, when you get into the middle school and the secondary school grades, it's all about sort of creating and designing games that have those sort of high points, high score, really extrinsic sort of ways to keep the older student sort of actively focused on what's going on, but not so much with younger learners is what research tells us. We don't want to take away from their intrinsic interest in learning more and engaging more. In fact, when we were piloting this in a kindergarten classroom and we had a couple of students go through the episode, and we asked the teacher, if there was anybody else that she might want us to, see how they responded to going through and working through it. And she said, well, I have one other student. They're just finishing up breakfast. They came in late this morning, but I don't know if he's the student that you want to work with because, he has a lot of difficulty, sitting still and attending and keeping engagement. And we said, oh no, he's the perfect person. We'd love to be able to see how he sort of interacts and what he thinks of the episode. And he was so excited. in doing the episode that he wanted to play through it multiple points at times. He was jumping up out of his seat. He was cheering in the air as he discovered and found things and clicked on things and wanted to learn more. And so he just demonstrated how having those kinds of tools that give children these opportunities for success to be able just to think and wonder and explore really is a wonderful point for any learner wherever they are within their educational opportunities and experiences.
So we're excited to share our first adventure with you tonight, and you're gonna see that we're gonna expand on the episode in a variety of different ways and show you how to really incorporate this into your classroom.
So as we go through this, and again, we've done this as a playthrough so that we can go ahead and stop at various points and talk about the pedagogy behind what's happening. Typically, if we were to do this as a play, having children in the classroom, interact with it and play through it. Most of our episodes that are a little bit longer, like this one, the community helpers, would take about 15 minutes from start to finish for a child to go through. The only exception to that, which takes probably closer to a 20-minute range, is one of our new MAPS episodes that you may have noticed in the very beginning. And one of the other things is a couple of new features that I do want to let you know that are now actually going to be introduced in the next month or so. We just saw them demoed by our engineering team this past week. You're going to see that along the bottom that there's words and you can hear the words are being said. There is going to be a button where you can have anything that's said repeated. So that, if you have a child who misses it, or if you as a teacher want to punctuate or emphasize, for example, what is the question being asked before you have a group of young, small group of learners working together on trying to figure out how they might respond to it or what their responses might be like, you can have that repeated. And then the other piece of it is that we're going to have an opportunity for you to be able to get to a point of the episode and stop, and then be able to return to it, say the next day. The fire alarm goes off, or you don't have quite as much time to get through the whole episode as you thought, and be able to start back up where you left off, even without a sign-in.
So Ruth asked a great question. So what devices will this work on? So we work with a very large school district that has computers that are some of the newest computers to some of the oldest computers, to children bringing in iPads, to children having devices that they find in the classroom. What's nice about this, because of our web-based format, it works on every type of device, whether it's Chromebooks, phones, iPads, whatever you have in the old computers, new computers,
PCs, Macs,
everything.
Right.
So, and we are constantly working to uncover any glitches that might occur from a technological standpoint. Excellent question.
So I'm just going to kind of scoot us right up ahead. We've introduced ourselves to Ella already, and she's going to start us on this adventure together. So just kind of go ahead. So let's hear what that mystery is.
We have a mystery to explore, and we will collect clues from primary sources to find the answer to our history question. How have community helpers changed over time? We will put the clues into our researcher journal and use them throughout our adventure. Let's go! We have gone back in time to pay a visit to a place in Washington, D.C. This picture was taken a long time ago before anyone you know was born. What do we see?
Now, there's a couple things I want to point out here. So you'll notice that what Ella says is this photo was taken a long time ago before anyone you know was born. Now, we know from the Library of Congress, where we found this particular image, that this is from 1899, and as she said, in Washington, D.C. But we didn't say 1899 as we introduced this particular photo. We gave a reference to chronological time for our youngest learners before anyone you know was born. And again, this goes back to what we know about research about children's understanding of historical time. So this is designed for our K-2 learners in the classroom. and recognizing that when you are 5, 6 years old, you know, you may be sitting there and thinking, well, you remember long time ago, like when I was turning 3 years old. So the year 1899 doesn't have any sort of substantive context for them to be able to understand. So we use that sort of context of before anyone on the earth, you know, was born. That's how long ago this was.
So when you're noticing this picture, we've only shown you a portion of the picture. Why do you think that this is a technique called crop it. And why do you think that with our young learners, kindergarten, first, second graders, we decided to only show them a very small portion of the picture? Beautiful. Focus. And going back, I see Ruth's question, which I don't want to miss. Yes, we can link it in Google Classroom and Seesaw as well. Kids get overwhelmed. Love it. Great. To really focus their attention and slow down their looking. A lot of times, as Eileen was mentioning, we privilege the text, but in a classroom textbook or a piece of children's literature, we really want them to slow down their looking and pay attention to all aspects of the photo. Love it. Thank you for the feedback too in the chat.
Our first clue is to look at the people in the photo. Let's find the children in the picture. Tap on the children when you find them. Yes.
Okay, so now you're seeing what's called, we're zooming in. We're taking a very careful look. First we crop the picture and now we're zooming in. We focused in on the children. Why do you think we focused in specifically on the children at first? Connection, familiar, very good, excellent. Action
relates to, that's
beautiful.
Right. So this is that idea, the students are kids themselves. So we're connecting, we're starting with that familiar, right? Before we sit there and worry about sort of then scaffolding new knowledge and information and context and understandings and fostering inquiry, we want to kind of make sure that they have something to ground themselves in that is what they know about. Kind of like when children run out to a playground, they run up to other children, right? And have some curiosity about who they are, learning more about them. So that's where we focus their lens first. The other thing that you might notice is that up in the upper left-hand corner, sort of with the blue that is around it, is our researcher journal. And as we are clicking on things, you will start seeing them sort of fly into that journal. So maybe you in your class, oftentimes we'll see teachers in the elementary school do this with science, might have a science journal where students keep sort of their work and their ideas. But this is our researcher history journal, where they're going to be collecting the clues that they're going to be utilizing that evidence later to be able to make some determinations and figure out what kind of information that they can surmise from this evidence that they're using. So in these early years, we're trying to help develop children's sense of connections with evidence-informed decision-making, right? So I'm going to collect these clues, then I'm utilizing those clues later. I'm going to try to figure out, what do I know or what have I learned about this scene that I'm exploring?
So we're going to continue on.
Another clue to help us figure out what happened long ago is what people in the photo are wearing. What is a clothing item that every child is wearing? Yes, they are all wearing hats. Now, let's find the adult in the picture.
So we're going to skip by the whole adult. It's a similar sort of process. We'll focus in and zoom in on the adult and collect some information. So yep, Marilee, you got that one too, hat. But you know, if they hadn't picked hat, if they had picked, say, a dress, or they had picked the pants, then there would be the supportive scaffolding to be able to help them look again and see, oh, I'm not sure if everyone is wearing, you know, a dress. Why don't you look again, so that they can go ahead and be able to reflect on their ideas. So again, we This scaffolded approach, we focused on the people, we focused on what the people were wearing, we focused on the adult here, and then we're going to go ahead and help them look at the fact that actually there are words in this photo, and the words are also clues. So you can see this sort of slow approach that we're taking here to help them find all of this evidence, all of this kind of information that appears just in this little piece of this photograph. So here we'll go ahead and looking at this
the photo that can be important
school.
clues. Find the word school, tap on it to save it to your journal. School begins with the letter S. Find this letter. Yes, that sign says school.
So you will see, and that's a great question Mary Catherine asked, like, is there only one answer? So it's not even that whether there's just one answer. So no, you will see that Ella will have a response and encourage children to go back and look and explore. Sometimes, we'll look again and see what else you might find. And you can see here when they are asked to tap on the word school, but not every child might yet be at the point where they can recognize the word school. So we scaffold, find the letter S, and then we help guide them to be able to begin exploring that maybe if they have the letter recognition skills at that point. So there's various levels of scaffolding that we introduce here. So again, we're going to sort of jump ahead a little bit more. And once we collect the clues, we then take them to the journal and we revisit and review what they have collected so far.
An adult and a sign that says school. Which of these clues shows us that this is a picture from long ago? When this photo was taken, it was in fashion for everyone to wear hats, even adults. This clue provides evidence that the photo is from long ago.
So they could have also here selected the child wearing a hat, and they would have gotten a response. So there's not just one answer. If they had picked the word school, then Ella would say something like, oh, I'm not sure what about the word school would tell us that this is from long ago. Do you want to look at the other clues and see what you think? So there's that sort of support to say, go back and think about that. Or maybe you could have a conversation in the classroom. And that's the way we oftentimes do it. We do sort of some adult facilitation too, while we're sharing this, as opposed to children doing it in isolation.
It's really thinking about the use of evidence and making a claim with the evidence that you've collected. So now we've expanded even more. We're still using the crop it technique. And what we've done is we've revealed a little more of the photograph. So when you look at this one, now you can see that there are some horses in the photograph, but we're really not sure what's going on in this primary source. So we ask the question.
What animal do you see? Drag the matching animal to the box.
So we've added 3 different primary sources from the Library of Congress. But one of the things that we tried to do is to try to make it a little bit challenging for young learners. Remember, these are 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds using this. So we didn't pick, specifically, we did not pick a white horse. There's a pig, a cow, and a black horse that they could choose. All, again, primary sources from the Library of Congress collection. And you can see that we've matched that and we've saved it to the researcher journal. But now we've even opened up the image even more, the primary source. We've exposed a little more of the primary source to a man holding something, but we're still not sure what it is because it looks so different from things that we're used to in our everyday life. So we collect that image. Again,
Let's look closer at what the man is holding in his hand. What shape does this remind you of?
So in this particular case, we're trying to bring in some mathematics concepts, incorporating shapes, a circle, a square, so that the child can engage in this cross-disciplinary looking at this image.
Right, so we use lots of different kinds of knowledge and ways of knowing to be able to develop our hypotheses, right, as historians, about what exactly is happening here.
So there's a couple of comments. One is, Marilee wondered if you could show what would happen if a wrong choice is made, the scaffolding, they just wanted to see that. And also just a reminder to either write your questions in the Q&A, or if you write them in the chat, make sure that they're to all panelists and attendees, which is in the drop down next to all panelists.
Absolutely. There are a few points as we go through this that you'll see, and it's really not, again, it's not about right or wrong choices that they're making. It's just there's a response for whatever they click on. So that's really, and you're going to see that as we go through that at various points that, like with the example of school, instead of selecting school, what we were showing is they clicked on public as a word. And so we'll kind of point out a few other places where what Ella will say when a child will select on things that might be different than we're thinking in our adult minds about what we would otherwise choose and go through. The other thing is that as we're going through this, the question was about, do you do the first slideshow as a whole class challenge? And that is exactly the way, particularly with our young learners, that we prefer to introduce this. We like doing it either whole class, or some teachers do, like a small group, if you have like sort of reading groups set up that you work with, that you take them through that with an adult facilitated sort of exposure to the episode, and then have them have the opportunities at, say, a learning center in the classroom, or if you have a computer center in the classroom, where they can go back and revisit it either with a buddy and be able to have a conversation space, or even individually. And even also, if they have access to devices at home, you can foster homeschool connections as well, because they can then go ahead and play it with their family as well. And that thing, what's really beneficial is the conversation space for children to be able to see the different ideas that come out through this process of inquiry.
And we'll show you later on in the presentation, we'll show you some great homeschool connections that you can make with this that will really excite both children and their caregivers.
So once we sit there and we kind of get this clue of the shape, we also look at what the size of this object is to help us figure out maybe what's going on. And so again, drawing off of other primary sources from the Library of Congress, we have children sort of use their estimation skills and figure out which one of these containers do you think this object would fit in?
The object would fit in. It might be a little big to fit in this bucket.
So that's an example, right? So Ella said, it might be a little big to fit in this bucket. She didn't say you're wrong. She said it might be. So maybe, think about that. If it's too big, do you think it might be too big? So if it's too big to fit in that bucket, what would it fit into? What would be a choice that it might fit into?
I think it might fit into this icebox. An icebox was used a long time ago before people had refrigerators. They would place a giant block of ice in the box with their food to keep it cold. So, have you figured out what the man is holding in his hand? Let's find one more clue. I noticed there was some writing on the cart. Take a look at it. Can you see the word ice? Tap each time you see it.
So there's several places where the word ice appears now on this cart. This is our sort of final section of the photograph for us to take children through to explore clues. And this is one of the things that we found in our testing with our illustrious kindergartners, is that for those who are able to identify the ice that's up at the top, at the Kennebec ice, there's the ice that's sort of a little bit hidden behind the man, but a few children were able to locate it. But our most attentive children noticed the ICE in the word office. And we noticed that as we were testing it with kindergartners, and we said, you know what? That is a really amazing observation that they would see ICE in the word office that is here. And we didn't want to say to them, oh, that's wrong, that's not the word ice. So what Ella says is, if they should click on that, what amazing observation skills you found ICE that is in the word office. So again, not saying wrong. We sit there and we acknowledge and celebrate their close observation.
That's why it was important that we went through multitudes of testing with young children, because we didn't even pick it up at first. They picked it up. So that's how we changed, made some early changes in our beta version.
What we have figured out. The man is holding a large cube-shaped object and standing in front of a cart with the word ICE. But that is not all that we found. In the same picture, we also saw a group of children standing with a woman in front of a building with the word school on it. Let's look in your journal to see everything you've collected. Let's look at our clues. We have a woman standing in front of a school. What do you think that woman does for a job? Mother, teacher, cart driver?
So this is great. We loved this one when we were doing our pilot testing with kids, because if you go to the Library of Congress and you find this particular image, and we've given you links and we'll talk a little bit about the teacher guide, it doesn't specifically say what the job is of this woman photographed in the picture. Could she be a mother? Could she be a teacher? Could she be a cart driver? What do you think? What do you think? Do you think she's a mother, teacher, or cart driver? And what's cool about this, while we're waiting, some of you are typing in teacher. A lot of people are saying
I have a
teacher.
feeling we're going to have an occupational bias here, right? About her being a teacher. But you know what? It is exactly, Lori. See, the reality is here, from a historian's perspective, any of these are plausible answers. She could have been a mother of one of the children, or maybe another child at the school. She might be the teacher of the children. Or maybe she was the person who drove the cart there that day, along with the ICE delivery person. We don't know, because we actually don't have that information in the written narrative that accompanies this image. But that's not really what the important thing is. What we want children to do now is, whatever their choice is, mother, teacher, or cart driver, select one of those, and then what clues are you going to use to support your idea? Eileen, we're figuring she was very progressive for that period of time, right?
So let's see what she says.
You think she might be a teacher. Choose 2 clues from your journal that tell us why you think so. Good thinking. That makes sense.
So for the playthrough, we picked logical answers. However, a child could pick the horse. So Ella might say, so you think she teaches the horse? To get children thinking in this process and asking themselves, well, maybe not. So let me think, or rethink my response based on the evidence that we've collected in our researcher journal.
Right. And as many of you are doing, those very same sort of critical kinds of questions that you're thinking about, like Eileen, would a female be driving a cart driver? Or Mary Catherine, you know, it looks like she's dressed in all white, right? That would be a pretty fancy outfit for somebody who was sitting there on top of a cart, you know, with horse to take care of. So those are really important things to reflect on and think about as you go through. So as after they go through this process, the other thing that we do is we make connections between life long ago and life today.
So here we have the set of pictures that you've seen as we've gone through this episode, and then we've shared with them another set of primary source images to see if they can make comparisons between how do community helpers change over time. So we reintroduce the inquiry from the beginning of the session. So here we have what's called the teacher's guide. So every episode, with the exception of the very first short episode on primary sources, has a teacher's guide. The teacher's guide is to provide our teachers with examples where they can extend the episode. What we're hoping is that this is just a jumping off point for understanding about community helpers in history.
So along with sort of obviously the essential questions that are guiding the particular interactive episode, there's some historical background for you as the teacher. There are connections with the standards. There's linkages to children's literature, and every primary source that appears in the episode, we give you the direct link. So if you wanted to create like a classroom hard copy set for children in your classroom so that they could kind of play along in their own version or with a buddy in the class, you can do that as well, and you have easy access to that information.
And a good way for a play along, as Ilene was sharing. So if we got to that section where what animal is this, the children could hold up a printed copy of the animal that they think that it is.
Right, maybe one other child goes up to the interactive whiteboard. So these are examples of some of the extensions that we feature within the teacher's guide.
So where does ice come from anyways? You know, we're down here in Tampa, Florida, and it's still hot. It was a hot day today. So before refrigerators, where did we even get ice?
So we really want to extend this idea of the inquiry with children. So we bring in other primary sources to understand this context of life long ago, and where in the world did ice come from if you were living in particularly a hot climate where you couldn't just go ahead and get ice from your neighborhood water supply. And so this idea of harvesting ice, which is quite a novel concept for children in the South, where,
Right.
where we live.
Except when they've seen, the Frozen movie, and they connected a
Right.
lot to
Yeah.
Frozen.
So the funny thing is now this is part of young children's funds of knowledge because of the movie Frozen, that they make that connection. Exactly. No, it's probably no worries, Mary Lee. That's right. That Disney reference.
From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
So this is another example of a primary source that's available in our teacher's guide, which shows the harvesting of ice. And there's a lot of different concepts that can be brought up here. The use of horses, walking on a frozen river or lake, dividing up that area for the harvesting of ice into blocks. How does that work? You could even bring some mathematics skills associated here. But this is a great example of using an old film from the Library of Congress. And in this particular primary source image, once you've collected the ice, you've harvested, and it's so strange to think about harvesting ice when we live here in Florida and we talk about harvesting strawberries. But harvesting ice is shown here. Once you've harvested, how do you load it and how do you get it to places far away?
Right, so that great economics concepts of production and
distribution
consumption,
and consumption.
Right.
Yeah. So this is a great section, and this is one that you can do specifically to extend this to home school connections. So how do we make ice cubes today?
So, long ago, this idea of ice cubes was so novel. It was such a special and unique thing. In fact, it was only the elite that had access to ice cubes. And here we have that also comes from the Library of Congress. On the left-hand side, you can see the US patents for ice cube trays. So somebody had to come up with this idea, the innovation, that once we had a way to keep things frozen, that you can go ahead and create and form ice. Oh, and I love, Ilene, exactly the way you're talking about this cross-curricular connection to the phases of matter. And Marilee, the memory for those of us who remind us of the different kinds and ways in which ice cube trays looked at. And this idea of ice cubes were so novel that there even were recipe books about how you make ice.
So, we have all of these cooking shows on television, where these families having baking contests. Well, could you imagine having your kids in class against class, designing and developing the most innovative ice cube recipe?
Right. And of course, we love our literature connections. For those of us in the early childhood elementary grades, these are the ways that we sort of help build and foster content knowledge for our young learners. And here we have some of a selection of some of the wonderful ones that we think really connect with this particular interactive episode. So the Ice Horse is a wonderful story about a young boy and his horse from up in Maine who are part of that ice industry, and it sort of gives a more contextual background about that experience. Cocoa Ice is about one young child who lives in the Caribbean, and she has a lot of this wonderful natural resource of cocoa, and another child who lives up in the Northeast where there is ice available, and they're trying to figure out how they can exchange their relative goods with one another to be able to enjoy each of their resources that they have in their own environments.
So here's a design challenge for you that we've been thinking about associated with us living here in Florida, or Cocoa Ice, or the book by Ice. So if you had a block of ice or blocks of ice in Maine, let's say that was just harvested, how would you get the ice from Maine to Florida?
Without melting.
Without melting. Well, that's obviously,
right.
that's the biggest challenge. Can you imagine that? How do you get the ice? So this could be a design challenge for your young learners in class. What type of material might you wrap the ice cube in that would prevent it from melting faster than another?
Yes, fantastic STEM connections there,
Beautiful.
right?
Yes.
And in fact, Laura Springle's book on ice really tells a story about the history of the ice business, which many people consider the first startup business in the United States. This sort of idea of harvesting ice and trying to send it off to hot tropical places where they don't have that commodity available to them.
Does anyone want to guess what they used to wrap ice with to ship it? Well, I just gave you a clue, but to ship it to places far away from places in the country. Ooh, who said that?
Lori. Sawdust. Ruth, that was a good guess. Mary Catherine, sawdust. Yes. So we have a very knowledgeable group with us right today. But you could sit there and think about the different things that could be tested by children to explore. And not only did they use the sawdust, but they put it in the bottom of the boat so it would stay sort of in the cooler water while they went in. Their first attempts, of course, ended up in just puddles arriving on site. That was all. So they certainly learned that they needed to do some different things.
So when we talk to children about this, a lot of the children say, oh, wrap it in tin foil. So great, very good. Good job with the sawdust. Well, one of the other things that we have with the KidCitizen site is we have a group in what's called the TPS Teachers Network. And the TPS Teachers Network is funded by the Library of Congress as a place where teachers can go and participate in discussions or just getting ideas and exploring or exchanging ideas around the use of primary sources in classrooms. And in our KidCitizen site, we're pretty much focused on the K-5 learner. And this is a free site to join, and you don't get spam or anything from it. It's just a great place to exchange ideas.
And through this professional learning community, you can also find out about other free trainings and opportunities for networking, connecting with other educators from around the country who are utilizing primary sources as part of their instruction.
So one of the really cool things that we have too, you can obviously use any of our episodes with your kids as much as you want, use them with parents, but imagine if you were a little bit tech savvy and you wanted to create your own episode just like this. Well, we're currently working on a 3-part, very short webinar series that teaches you how to make your own episodes. And we actually have a template called the KidCitizen Editor that you can get, again, everything no charge, that you can use to create your own episodes. And if you don't want to use our character Ella, you can have a child in class be the character, or you can bring in your own regionally specific primary sources that you want to use to create your own episode using Crop It, Zoom In, or other devices that you've seen tonight with ours.
Right, so you could record the voices of the students in your class. They can become the voices that are on the interactive episode as well. And the way that this works is that we will hold the episodes in our cloud, but they're not shared outside of your classroom unless you want to do so. So they're not posted to our website so that you can go ahead and protect the identity and privacy of students in your own class.
So if you wanted to, so let's just say you're a teacher in Montana, and then you're a teacher in Los Angeles and another teacher in Florida, and you wanted to share different episodes, maybe around the time of the year, you know, the seasons of the year at a point in time, you could just simply copy the link after you've created an episode and share it with just those 2 other teachers. So one of the key things to remember is that you can share the episodes with your students, you can get teacher's guides, you can learn more about the pedagogy by going to our KidCitizen site at KidCitizen.net.
So as we come to the end of tonight's presentation, we're welcome any other questions or comments that anybody has or discussions, but we're so glad that you were able to join us tonight and explore with us about the potential of KidCitizen as part of your curriculum and your teaching with young learners. I think you're muted. No
Mary Lee was wondering if there was going to be an app at some point or if it was always just going to be on the web like it is now.
So one of the things that we started exploring, we explored different types of formats like with apps, and we found that the web-based version was best right now, but we're always looking at other alternatives as digital technologies change to adapt to the needs of the users. It's a good question.
I think you muted.
I think you
muted again.
Sorry, I keep forgetting I unmute to unmute. I will just say that the TPS Teachers Network does have some wonderful ideas, and so I encourage everybody to go in there. And I love this idea of the KidCitizen editor. I could just think of so many imaginative ways that teachers can use it. So thank you for developing this resource and for doing it so thoughtfully and for sharing the background with us, because I think some people may have seen it, but just to know how much was involved and how thoughtfully you've organized it is really a wonderful resource for everyone.
Thank you. And we haven't announced this yet, but we've been working on actually the conceptual design for a few more episodes that were not listed on that page. One is focusing specifically on recycling as a civic activity and getting kids to think about it by looking at historic photographs and primary sources from the past. And another one we look at, which is a really, we think of some creative primary sources, and looking at milk in schools and how the history of milk in schools, but through primary sources. And we've been found a treasure trove of primary sources through a variety of different databases in the Library of Congress that explore that, and again, connected to children's lives.
Right, so the question will be around how Congress affects our everyday lives at school, and kind of going back to the fact that we all find milk in our lunchrooms. So
that's great. I think I'd be interested to know a little bit more about that too. So this was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time and for sharing this with us. And I don't see any additional ones, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. But if somebody does have a question, we'll certainly take it for the next minute or two.